Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a hidden system that touches pretty much every single product you buy, from your phone to the food on your table. It's this entire global industry built on a really clever and, yeah, deeply controversial illusion. So let's dive in.
Okay, picture this. A gigantic container ship glides into port. You look up and you see it's flying the flag of, say, Panama, or maybe it's Liberia, or the Marshall Islands. Seems simple enough, right? But what if I told you that the ship, its owner, and maybe even its cargo have absolutely nothing to do with that country? And here's the kicker. This isn't some rare thing. It's the norm.
So how is that even possible? Well, the answer really lies in understanding the sheer, mind-boggling scale of this whole setup.
Yep, that's right. More than 70% of the entire world's commercial shipping fleet is registered this way. This isn't some tiny loophole we're talking about. This is the very engine that powers modern global trade. So what is this system, and why is it so incredibly popular with ship owners?
It all comes down to something called a flag of convenience. And honestly, it's one of the biggest open secrets in the entire maritime industry.
So what is a flag of convenience, or FOC for short? Basically, it lets a ship owner from, let's say, Germany, register their vessel in Panama. And just like that, boom, that ship now operates under Panamanian law, not German law. In these countries, the ones that offer this service, they're called open registries for a reason. They are open for business to pretty much anyone, no matter where they're from.
You know, this whole system has a pretty wild history. It actually kicked off back in the early 20th century, when some clever American shipowners used Panama's registry to get around prohibition laws. But the practice absolutely exploded after World War II. See, shipowners in places like the US and the UK were facing really high taxes and strict labor laws. So they started what's known as the flight from national flags, basically jumping ship to other countries to slash their operating costs. And ever since, international law has kind of been playing catch-up, which has led us straight to the FOC-dominated world we see today.
So why on earth would a ship owner do this? Well, from a business perspective, it's almost a no-brainer. First off, you get way lower taxes. I mean, some of these countries are basically tax havens. Then you can hire cheaper international crews without being tied to your home country's often more expensive labor laws. Plus, and this is a big one, the regulations for things like safety and the environment can be a lot less strict. And on top of all that, the registration process itself is often ridiculously easy, sometimes just a quick online form. It's a whole package of pure economic advantage.
But here's the turn. All of this convenience for the people who own the ships, well, it comes at a price. And that price is often paid by the crew, by the environment, and really by anyone who depends on the safety of our oceans.
Because while the benefits for the owner are crystal clear on a spreadsheet, the risks, well, they often stay hidden right up until the moment a disaster strikes.
Now check this out. Data from a huge, decade-long study in Malaysian ports shows a really troubling pattern. Ships registered under these flags of convenience, they were found to have safety deficiencies in nearly 43% of inspections. That is significantly higher than the 35% found on ships flying their national flags. And we're not just talking about minor paperwork issues here. We're talking about serious problems with fire safety, navigation equipment, and even the structural soundness of the ship itself.
And to put that into perspective, this isn't a small sample size. That one study found over 1,800 FOC ships with these kinds of problems. So what this data suggests is a pretty direct line between that regulatory flexibility we talked about and a potential compromise in safety standards, with very, very real consequences for the crew and for our oceans.
So this is the fundamental conflict, right? On one side, you've got ship owners who get a massive competitive edge. They can cut costs, be more agile, and ultimately make more money. But on the other side, critics are pointing to some really serious concerns: the potential for exploiting seafarers, bigger risks to safety and the environment, and a system that can make it incredibly hard to hold owners accountable when things go wrong. Now, with over 70% of the world's ships involved, you're probably wondering, who is policing all of this? I mean, how do we make sure these ships are actually safe out there? Okay, so there is a global system of checks. First, under international law, you have what's called flag state responsibility. That means the country on the flag, let's stick with Panama, is supposed to be responsible for that ship. But the real teeth of enforcement often comes from something called port state control. And this is crucial. It means any country can inspect a foreign ship that comes into its port. So the US can inspect that Panamanian flag ship when it docks in Los Angeles. If it fails, it can be detained right there. And layered on top of all that, you have international bodies like the IMO setting global standards and groups like the ITF fighting for the rights of seafarers.
And this right here is the heart of the whole legal debate. The Geneva Convention says there has to be a genuine link between the ship and its flag state. The state has to effectively exercise control. But the billion-dollar question is this: can a small nation with maybe a tiny maritime administration really and truly oversee thousands of the world's biggest and most complex ships? Critics argue that it's just not possible, and that this turns a whole FOC system into a kind of legal fiction that lets owners avoid real accountability.
So, after decades and decades of debate, the flag of convenience system is still in many ways on trial in the court of global opinion. It's a system that is somehow both essential to our modern economy and at the same time deeply controversial.
And just look at how concentrated this all is. Back in 2018, just 5 countries, Panama, the Marshall Islands, Liberia, Malta, and the Bahamas, accounted for over half of the world's entire shipping tonnage under these flags. So this isn't some scattered global system. It's an industry dominated by just a handful of key players who make a ton of money from these registries.
Which leaves us with the big, final question. There's no denying it. Flags of convenience have created an incredibly efficient, incredibly convenient system for global trade. But as we've seen, that convenience comes with some very real costs. So the question we really have to ask ourselves is not just whether the system is convenient, but whether it's truly fair and safe for everyone involved.